Our government here in the United States of America has recently been confronting some seriously controversial topics that have split the American people down the middle. Should abortions remain legal? How about the death penalty? Should we keep our data electoral system? But one topic in particular has been addressed in an unprecedented way. What I'm referring to is marijuana. As of the November 2016 election, 8 states and the District of Columbia have legalized recreational marijuana, and more than half of all the states have passed some other form of legalization measures. This is an interesting situation because the federal government is still trying to fight a war against it. Now, you would think it to be a simple fix: change marijuana's schedule under the Controlled Substances Act. However, politicians have been refusing to so much as vote on it. This is why many states are just ignoring them at this point. Although drug abuse is still a major public health issue, I claim that the movement of states towards drug reform is pushing the federal government to end the war on drugs because the new state policies are proving that zero-tolerance policies are not the best way to fight drug abuse. This issue needs to be addressed as the public health crisis it is, so that people with drug addiction can get help and citizens' tax dollars are not being wasted on ineffective solutions. I plan to illustrate the ways that our lovely states are making the federal government look like a bunch of clowns. Marijuana is still listed as Schedule I controlled substance, which means it has no medical value according to the Controlled Substances Act. This has been a major controversy considering they don't have the support of the scientific community. Despite this federal classification, many states have decriminalized and/or legalized marijuana. This past election has shown legalization has the support of the majority of voters. However, even though the citizens voted in favor of it, the states still have to create a system of taxation and regulation. This process could potentially take years to finish, but it's a step in the right direction. Tom Huddleston from Fortune wrote an article on the success of the marijuana industry in Colorado. In 2015 alone, the state had $996.2 million in sales of legal marijuana for medical and recreational purposes. The $135 million collected in taxes from those sales are going towards schools and youth substance abuse programs. It is also predicted that there will be close to $6.7 billion in sales across the U.S. this year. States that have not legalized marijuana are missing a major opportunity for increasing tax revenue because sales outside of the states with legal industries are made underground where taxes mean nothing. Colorado has shown that legalization can stimulate the state market through the creation of jobs, and by allowing the people who would have been imprisoned for their career path to now be law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, the state is saving a large sum of money that would have otherwise gone towards prison, court, and arrest costs. We cannot be certain if public support is causing the states to change policy, or if it is that the state policies are swaying the public opinion. But regardless of where this shift started, it is clear to Abigail Geiger that millennials are leading the way. In the past 10 years, millennials' support for marijuana legalization has more than doubled from 34% to 71%. Generation X and the baby boomers show significantly less support than millennials, but even so, the majority of them are still in favor of legalization. Despite the wide range of support for this movement, there are still those out there who are opposed to it. Some common arguments against it are that legalizing marijuana will increase drug use in our nation's youth, and that people convicted of drug crimes belong in jail. However, there have been multiple studies done that disprove these arguments. One analysis of these studies published this year in the International Journal of Policy says that data shows no conclusive evidence of an increase in marijuana use where medical marijuana was legalized. The data actually indicates that on a state-by-state basis, the use of marijuana has stayed about the same or decreased. Another study from Health Affairs revealed that prescription drug use was greatly reduced when medical marijuana was an alternative. Before this past election, there were only 4 states plus DC that had legalized recreational marijuana. Now 4 more states have voted yes to legal recreational use of the plant: California, Maine, Nevada, and Massachusetts. 4 other states, Arkansas, Florida, Montana, and North Dakota, have passed or updated medical use laws. This brings the count of states that, at minimum, have legal medical marijuana up to 28. Katie Steinmetz, a political writer from the New York Times, discussed the results of the election and what she calls the green rush. California's legalization is seen as a signaling of the end of the federal marijuana prohibition because of its massive economic influence in the US and the rest of the world. Even though this wasn't a highly followed topic this past election, both candidates agreed that there needs to be drug policy reform, and neither of them openly disagreed with the Obama administration's approach. For the time being, it looks like the federal government is allowing the states to keep moving forward with their policy reform. The states are beginning to fall like dominoes in favor of marijuana legalization, considering more than half already have it legalized one way or another. A major issue that has arisen in post-legalization states is banking. Since marijuana is still technically illegal, banks do not want to take the risk. Businesses in states that license them to sell marijuana cannot have bank accounts to keep their money secure, which prevents them from accepting credit and debit card transactions. Writer for the Washington Post, Keith Humphreys, points out that this will likely lead to a loss in states' tax revenues because they won't have accurate accounts of sales. This is especially problematic in California because the ballot that was passed had an error in the fine print, and so now the medical marijuana is untaxed until the recreational market opens. States that are taking a stand against the war on drugs are proving to the citizens that there are better and more efficient ways to control drugs than the federal government's zero-tolerance policies. Drew DeSilva, a writer for the Pew Research Center, says that states are changing many aspects of drug policy. Some of these changes include reducing or eliminating mandatory sentences, easing up on drug use and possession penalties, and making drug courts more available to people in need of them. Over the past few years, this has led to an overall decrease in incarceration rates for drug crimes, which is beneficial to the states because it allows them to use the money that would have gone towards prisons for the funding of other programs. Even Texas, one of the most conservative states, has reaped the financial benefits of switching from mandatory prison sentences to programs like drug courts. 3 state prisons have closed since 2007 solely because they were no longer necessary. Citizens have started to realize that the state's approach to drug policy benefits them more than the federal government's because it keeps the community members out of jail and allows their tax dollars to be used more efficiently. This has very important effects on the war on drugs because if the people like where the states are going with drug policy, they will vote for politicians that will then vote to change or even end the war on drugs. State policies are changing to be a less direct opposition of drugs to a more subtle and effective system. It may have taken around half a century for the states to realize that high incarceration rates for drug crimes do not entail success, but now some states are very openly defying the federal government's laws, and we can finally study approaches that will improve the overall well-being of American communities. Drug abuse in this country will not get better if we simply imprison the people who have fallen victim to addiction. The only function of incarcerating drug users is to hide them from the rest of society because they don't fit the mold for mentally stable, successful citizens. Margot Hasha wrote an article exploring a study of drug courts and the criminal justice system. A main point she made was that in many cases, drug use and addiction preceded criminal activities. So, since this is the case, how is the government able to justify locking people up for something that could have been prevented in the first place? It is important that everyone understands the outcomes of states' new drug policies so that they can be educated voters. The responsibility of educating ourselves on our government's actions is left up to the people. States are pushing the federal government away from harsh drug policy without too much effort. What these states are doing is leading by example. They are advertising the benefits of decriminalization, legalization, and other drug policy reforms. There has been a steady flow of taxes into states that helps to fund education and, ironically, drug treatment programs. Drugs need to be brought out of the shadows so that stigmas behind them can fall away and stop the flow of money that is pulsating through illegal markets and causing cyclic drug abuse, and it's time that the people stand up for what's best for their communities.